This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
Yoo-hoo. What if we took words? What if the words were spoken and recorded, and then another person, Paddy Manning, took those words and put them into a book? And then we looked at those words and we spoke them into your ears in a podcast. That would be Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia, Patreon episodes, Inside the Greens.
Fuck, man. Fuck. You're blowing my mind, bro.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
It's not an official Greens Party podcast. It's produced by Michael the Griffin. We are back into Inside the Greens, baby. We had a little time away. We are diving back into this book and we are racing through it. We're getting so close to
it's the sound of us diving in.
We're talking about Chapter 9, Into Power. We're going to very quickly finish Chapter 8, which is taking a stand. We didn't get to the 2007 election. We'll briefly move through that. And then we're into it, baby. The Rudd government. Kevin Rudd is in power. Kevin 07. Everyone feels great and nothing bad ever happened. once he took power.
I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to hear all about these good golden times that last forever.
Yes. Look, I hate to inform you that we're breaking this up into two parts again. I'm sorry, there's just too much gold here. We're not going to get to the CPRS in this episode. We've touched on that in many other times. But there is some really spicy shit, okay, particularly at the state and territory level that I had no idea about at all and found very interesting when I was reading this particular chapter.
I don't think I've actually read this chapter myself yet, so I'm going in cold. I'm excited. Don't think I've read chapter 8.
On the way, everyone.
Or chapter 9, I haven't read.
All right, closes out with Chapter 8. We got up to just before the 2007 federal election. What did that mean for the Greens, Emerald Moon?
Well, the Greens, as you may have noticed, are called the Greens for trees. A little known fact. Green, it relates to the environment. And 2007, it was environment vibes. It was Millennium Drought. It was An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's smash hit, An Inconvenient Truth. Environment was front and centre, so Paddy Manning says in the book. Polls showed that Australians were the most concerned population about the impact of climate change of any surveyed around the world. 76% considered it a, quote, major problem. 77% indicated that they were prepared to pay more if it would help reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Oh, good. That's good. Thanks, Australia.
And so there was apparently bipartisan consensus on an emissions trading scheme. Of course, yes, as you're alluding to, we've spoken about this before. We spoke about this a little bit in the 2007 election special that we did, Patreon episode 56, so we won't dive too much into this. But we also have at this point in the book, and Paddy Manning, this is kind of, I found this interesting in Inside the Greens when he gets into the voter research stuff that the Greens are doing. We've got some new Roy Morgan research that was used to analyse the Greens voter base, identify those Greens voters most likely to switch, and work out what issues were most likely to appeal to them. From the book.
The non-Greens voters who are most likely to switch to the Greens.
Yes, sorry.
Yep.
A confidential internal paper by National Officer Mark Jeans provided a fascinating snapshot of the party's supporters. Demographically, the results were unsurprising. Compared with the rest of the country, Greens voters were younger, better educated. Yeah. They were twice as likely to have a degree and had higher income, although they were underrepresented in the highest income bracket of over $100,000 a year.
Yeah. Working class party, yeah.
Yeah, sort of. There were caveats to the young inner city trendy stereotype, however. More than 2/3 of Greens voters were partnered or had children. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, fuck, I'm so tired. I'm really sorry, guys. Guys, just break the fourth wall. I'm tired. I'm sorry. Okay. But I did want to say, once again, Greens voters, they fuck. That's all I wanted to say. They're partnered.
I assume most of those partners
children.
are like polycules as well. It's probably it's probably just like a couple of Greens voters with shitloads of various arrangements of ethical non-monogamy going on, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's new research actually. Well, I say research. I think it was some like News Corp article. I'm not sure where it came from, but talking about the most sexually active and, the sexual patterns of different voting people, which, by the way, we've already done. We did a whole episode on it. The Real Danger Dogs will know. We spoke about this way back when. And yeah, Greens voters fuck. It's true. The other thing that they did, but in terms of their interests beyond fucking, this research showed, this is from the book, Greens voters were more than 3 times likelier than the broader population to be concerned about the environment, of course, but they also ranked education twice as highly and gave much more weight to open and honest government. Greens voters cared far less than the rest of the country about managing the economy, business, law and order, and defence, which was at the bottom of the list. And Greens voters were at odds with the rest of the country on a handful of issues. This is interesting, not only, I think, in terms of where Greens voters were sitting at the time, but where the country was sitting at the time. So a 2/3 majority, this is of Greens voters, agreed that terrorists deserve the same rights as other criminals, whereas a 2/3 majority of Australians did not. I mean, I guess you're still a little bit like it is just after peak war on terror times, right? And so perhaps the backlash to the introduction of really, authoritarian or what's the word, oppressive and overreaching, some would say, legislation to quote unquote respond to terrorism that largely was very opaque and often probably violating, basic tenets of human rights. And yeah, I feel like the Greens probably would have been scrutinising that in a way that maybe the rest of the population wasn't, or certainly other politicians wouldn't have been.
Yeah, well, this would be after. So David Hicks is still in there, or he's in Guantanamo Bay until 2007. You've also got the Abu Ghraib scandal being broken as well, and very sensible centrist position we might take that rights to apply universally to everybody, regardless of the crime you're accused of or may or may not have committed. Seems like a pretty reasonable position to me, but no, apparently the majority of Australians were paying for blood.
Yeah. Okay, how about this one? A similar proportion of Greens agreed, as in about a 2/3 majority, agreed that homosexual couples should be allowed to adopt children, while a majority of Australians did not. This is 2007.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? 2000. I would like to know what the statistic is today, but honestly, it's bizarre to think that a majority of this country, when I was in high school, did not agree that gay couples should be able to adopt children.
Particularly when I think at that point you would have had a majority support for gay marriage as well, right?
Surely.
Like maybe people
but they're like, well, they can marry, but don't hurt the children. Don't deprive the poor children of their binary mother-father relationships. Okay.
And of course, because most people didn't agree with that, that was the wrong position to take, and the Greens were silly and out of touch, and they were on the wrong side of that issue. And
absolutely,
really
that's how it
look
works.
at themselves, and they should be more like Labor and adopt a popular position when most people agree.
Yeah,
or sometimes not even then.
Some might say at this point in history, they're just really turning more radical and straying away from their green roots, and that's why they'd be turning everyone off.
Yeah.
Okay, less than a third of Greens agreed that, quote, obedience and respect for authority are the most important values children should learn, while more than 60% of Australians agreed. What do you think?
I'm a little bit torn on this one. The
Really?
most important values? Well,
the most important values?
Well, no, yeah, let me clarify here. The most important values, absolutely not. What would be the most important values? Kindness, sharing, being nice to people, standing up for yourself, getting along with others. Yeah, these are good values. I guess my only flag with this is like, yes, obviously respect for authority, obedience, no good. I'm just saying that as I got older, I've looked back and thought about the times in which I was shitty to my parents, or in which I assumed that anyone older than me was telling me what to do was a fucking idiot. And I guess I wish I'd approached that differently sometimes, I suppose. Maybe that's just the nature of maturing.
Yeah. See, values-wise, I would say that that's not because of a lack of respect for authority. It was simply a lack of respect.
Right.
Like maybe you're just being a dick. I guess this is funny to me because it probably honestly still causes me problems because these values were not remotely instilled in me in any way And like, I think I mentioned on a recent episode that I was expelled from daycare. And it's kind of just because like, I just didn't, this has never made sense to me. It has never made sense to me that just because someone holds a particular position, you should do what they say. That like my parents would have been like, no, question why they're.
Question everything, yes.
Yeah. And I guess, my parents were probably Greens voters. So there you go. It tracks.
There you go. You want more evidence that Australia is a nation of cops? There you go. 60%.
Exactly.
Kids
I know.
should be learning obedience and respect for authority, regardless of what that authority does or believes, or the reasoning behind it. Then no, respect them. Yeah,
that's wild to me. Okay, but this research also showed that there was a lot of agreement between Greens voters and the rest of the population on some of the key issues that the Greens were talking about. So among the broader Australian population, 89% agree that, quote, if we don't act now, we'll never control our environmental problems. 87% agreed the gap between rich and poor is growing, and 69%, nice, agreed Aboriginal culture is an essential component of Australian society. So,
wow.
I'm interested in that first one as well. If we don't act now, we'll never control our environmental problems. I think we've probably shied. We don't like to say that anymore because we're like, no, there's still time. Please don't give up, because now everyone's just given up. Because in 2007, they all thought, well, we got to act now or nothing. We didn't act. And so now they're like, well, guess we'll never control our environmental problems.
Yeah, we can ameliorate the apocalypse a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Based on Morgan's value segments, the research identified two groups of non-Greens voters who were likely to switch: young optimists and the socially aware, noting that 75% of them were Labor voters.
Hello.
Very interesting. And the biggest opportunity to get the Greens vote from 8% to 11% was education funding.
Interesting.
So I think this is interesting as well, because education funding confuses me, and maybe I've said this on the podcast before, that it's like everyone pretty much, unless you're a just insane super right wing, agrees that education is good. But and they rank it highly. It always ranks highly in like issues for voters. But I don't really know if people are genuinely voting on it, because obviously the Greens have the best policy on education, right? But I don't know. What do you think about this?
Like, if it's their number one issue, yeah, I suppose so. I mean, yeah, what does it mean when either Labor or the Greens talk about, election being the number one issue, education rather being the number one issue? They're talking about fully funding public schools, I suppose. So this is obviously 2007. This is all pre-Gonski and everything, but still the disparity between the private and the public sector is clear for everyone to see. Rudd was talking about an education revolution, of course, which was
Laptops.
Was that it? And more funding, I assume.
All anyone remembered was laptops, that's for sure.
So, yeah, I mean, when the rubber hits the road is when Labor says, we love education. Oh, do you think that money should be allocated from the private sector to the public schools? Well, no, we don't need to hold anyone back. Everyone can get more money. Whereas the Greens are saying, no, we could, the richies could lose a bit of cash and all that money could go to actually funding our public education system. That would be good. There are losers. There are winners and losers here, because one section has been winning heaps for a very long period of time.
Yes. I guess that's true. We've also had this discussion about whether, should all the public schools have orchestra pits? Like, is it about private schools having less or public schools having more? Maybe it's a little bit of both.
I guess also you would have had around this time Howard, I think maybe going to this election, has, funding school chaplains. Do you remember that being a big issue?
God,
do you remember this kind of school chaplain vibe?
Fuck.
So yeah, I think that was a big part of it too. Yeah.
So there's kind of, it looks like there's fertile ground for the Greens to grow. They can start talking about education. This is their voter base. But there is this interesting, a much tougher assessment from the focus group. And I'll read out this quote. It's quite interesting. The Greens are caught between a rock and a hard place. They are seen to be a single issue party, and that issue is the environment. This both defines them and undermines them. Certainly, for the first time, the environment is on the voting public's agenda. So in one sense, the Greens' time is now, and many see this as the make or break election for the party. But both Liberal and Labor are on the bandwagon. The Greens need to ensure they remain in the debate and are seen as the reliable voice on the environment. the Greens are seen to lack any policies or experience outside of the environment. They also seem to be verging on the extreme in many of their views.
Fuck you.
Yeah. It's so confusing. And then at the same time, so there's that dilemma that still persists today, that it's like, that you've got that strong branding, you've got to be the voice for the environment, but also that's all people see you as. And then there's the Bob Brown question as well. So, quote, for most people, Bob Brown is the Greens party. Paddy Manning says he was seen as heroic, idealistic, but then some on the mainland had never heard of him. And he was also seen as too extreme, too old, etc., etc.
And there was that other, wasn't there other attitude things we've talked about where everyone was like, he keeps getting photographed near trees and stuff, standing on a log or whatever.
Oh yeah, so, like that's all that people see him as. He just spends too much time.
Man.
Well, he is a tree. He is a tree. Yeah. But voters like to see, and we saw earlier how people were saying, yeah, they value education. They also value kind of integrity in politics. And people in this focus group were saying they really like to see the Greens stepping into that kind of Democrats' role in the Senate, the quote, holding them to account and providing checks and balances vibe. I think that persists. I think a lot of people do still vote Greens for that, right? As it's kind of cringe in a way. It's a little bit, I don't know.
No, it's that still. I would still have a lot of split tickets. Yeah. People voting for Labor in the lower house and the Greens in the upper. I think we still have a lot of work to do to, be taken seriously as a party of government. I think in a lot of people's minds, you'd still have to work pretty hard to make that a real thing. We have an 18-year plan to get to a Greens government, of course, but not everybody's on board or is across the details there. So, but in 2007, the Greens aren't seriously. I mean, that is really the pitch, right? The pitch is get more Greens in Parliament to hold more power and hold the majors to account.
Yeah. At the same time, though, so Bob Brown is seen as the face of the party. This is interesting. Apparently, in the book, Paddy Manning says that Bob Brown at the time was internally campaigning to, quote, rein in the policies that they've been attacked on, including legalizing cannabis. I wonder if he still thinks that about cannabis now, but anyway. So the Greens are getting attacked in the media for that. They're also getting this, Paddy Manning talks about this kind of eternal problem of the Greens. He says the party always did better under a Labor government when they could peel off disenchanted progressive voters than they did under a coalition government when progressives not understanding the preference system, mistakenly believed that voting one Greens, then two Labor might somehow help the coalition win, so they'd better stick with Labor. The Greens call it the wasted vote myth, and it dies hard. Indeed it does, but I also thought it was the other way around. I thought that the Greens did better when there was a coalition government and there was less fear, I guess. It was more just kind of a tidal wave of, change, because it feels to me that the wasted vote thing is perhaps more damaging when there's a Labor government but people are scared that a coalition government's going to come in. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. No, my understanding has always been under a Labor government, that's when the Greens do well, particularly if people are dissatisfied with that Labor government, they want something more progressive. Yes, if they want to try and vote in a Labor government, then even though we have a preferential voting system, the thinking still goes, no, got to put number one next to the Labor candidate and give them the most vote that I can to help them win.
Sure.
Because my vote has to win the election.
Yes. Not what happened in 2022 though, right? It was very much a mood of let's kick the coalition out and lots of people voting for third parties, including the Greens, in order to do that.
Yeah, which is weird because Terry Butler told me that the only way that we could get a Labor government is by voting for her and Griffith. But we
I don't know what
didn't do
there.
that. And Max got in and they still got a Labor government.
It's really weird, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't get this stuff. I'm not a political expert.
Not a psephologist. I couldn't say. I don't know. So, okay, the election's coming up. There's a cast of stars on the Senate tickets for the Greens. We've got Dina Tarley is running. Jack Mundy is in the fourth spot.
What?
Hell, fuck yeah. Scott Ludlam.
Get him up the top. What are you doing?
I know. We love Jack Mundy.
I guess that's Lee Rhiannon. That's fine. But get Jack Mundy in there, baby.
Lee Rhiannon, blasphemy. Scott Ludlam is on there, Larissa Waters, and Sarah Hanson-Young.
Oof.
There's a little bit here about Sarah Hanson-Young's kind of upbringing, which is interesting. She had parents who were involved in anti-logging activism. She grew up off-grid in country Victoria, moved away for high school. She says, quote, "I was the token greenie." She remembers dating the son of a logger whose car had a bumper sticker reading, "Help the environment, run over a greenie."
What a cool bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Who is the company that's making these? Who's the people who
I
put
know,
in
who printed
time and
that,
effort
right?
into pumping these out? Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. She got pre-selected, Sarah Hanson-Young got pre-selected with a lot of support from Bob Brown, and then shortly afterwards found out she was pregnant and got some pretty shitty responses from people being like, "Can't believe you would deceive us like this and get pregnant and fuck it up," and pretty misogynistic stuff.
And she was like 26 or something?
She was really young.
20,
I don't know
really
exactly how
24,
old she was, but yeah, you can fact check that for me.
Okay.
She ended up winning that SA Senate spot, particularly because Nick Xenophon running peeled off Labor and LNP votes, which dropped them below the quota, and then she got up on preferences that runoff. She was the youngest woman ever elected to Parliament.
There you go.
There you
She's currently 43. She was born in 1981. So what's that?
So she was 26?
Yeah.
Nice. Ding, ding, ding.
Nice.
So the federal election results, the Greens won a small 1.4% swing towards them in the Senate. The ACT Greens did best with a 21% first preference vote, followed by Tasmania, 18%, and Victoria on 10%. Bob Brown was safe, easily earning a quota in his own right, but he had optimistically tipped the Greens would pick up seats in Victoria, Western Australia, and the ACT, and that Kerry Nettle would hold her spot in New South Wales. He would be disappointed.
Narrator. He would be disappointed.
He would be disappointed. That's right. So the Greens were stronger in the upper house. They had 5 senators, but they had to share the balance of power with Xenophon and Family First. The Democrats were wiped out. In the lower house, the party's best performance was in Melbourne, where Adam Bandt polled 23% on first preferences.
Whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that guy. Well, lost to the annals of history, I suppose. The Greens achieved official party status at this election. They get more resources. Presumably that meant, they get extra staff for leader's office and that sort of thing. But an interesting little observation for Paddy Manning to finish out this section. And this sounds familiar, right? So, quote, "From election cycle to election cycle, the pattern was becoming clear. The Greens set themselves optimistic goals for the balance of power and one day for government, and Brown, as national leader, would personify these aspirations and carry them on his shoulders. Inevitably, the party fell short, leading to a wave of introspection and division. Each time, however, the party was making gains, growing both in votes and in representation. In 2007, the Greens had won first preference votes in the Senate from 1.1 million Australians, smashing through the goal that Brown had set in 2004.
Yeah, what do you think? Do you think it's good for us to constantly be sort of talking ourselves up and making big calls about how many seats we could win, or should we always be the underdog? Because I feel like we've sort of played both in recent memory a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
But the general wisdom, I think, going back over the past decade, has been the Greens certainly talking up a big game. What do you think is the best approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you need to project power and remind voters that it's possible for us to have that power, given that one of the, biggest objections that remains to voting Greens is this belief that they, A, can't win in seats, and B, won't be able to wield power or make any real change once elected. And so you need to illustrate the pathway to your vote making a difference by voting Greens, which is real. But it's just like, both of the major parties don't have to do this, right? They're just like, we're trying to win government. And everyone's like, yes, good. Well done. You could do that, or you could not.
That's normal. Yeah. That's the good way to do it. That's the proper way to do politics.
That's the proper way. But the Greens say, well, these are the seats that we're targeting and we could have this, and, tries to respond to the wasted vote or the fears that they can't win. But it does mean that then after the election, they get the media going, but you said you were going to win 10 seats and then you didn't win them. And I mean, it's true. Like, I think, there is a question to be posed about the effects on the party when you have thousands of members who are really excited about these potential seats that you're going to win and the position of power that you're going to have, and maybe believe that all of that is going to come to fruition. And then when it doesn't, are like, oh, fuck, did we lose? Like, did we fail? And it is sad that it is sometimes lost what Paddy Manning is saying, that your vote can be going up steadily, like, for example, in recent state and territory elections, but because perhaps the seats didn't play out as was projected, people are like, is this bad? Are we fucked? And then everyone gets distracted arguing and, poring over the entrails of the election and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think unless your vote is going backwards, and the Greens' vote has gone backwards in some instances, and in some dramatic instances, particularly when the emergence of the Teals recently has seen some previously optimistic Green gains go backwards very dramatically. If that's less that's happening, feel good about yourself. You're in the Greens, for God's sakes, and you're building power, you're building support. That's good. Again, if you want to find out more about the 2007 election, we went in deep on that on Patreon episode 56. There you go. That is
the first election.
Finally concluded.
The first election to ever happen in Australia. We covered it.
Chapter 9 begins. Into power. You like power, don't you? Power. This chapter is looking at the Rudd-Gillard years. In this first part, we're looking at the global financial crisis. There is lots of Labor and Greens nastiness going on, which I hate nastiness.
Oh, gosh.
And yes, some very spicy happenings in Green branches at the state and territory level, that most of which I was completely
branch politics. Let's do it, baby.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like the state or territory branches, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Spicy shit.
Just as spicy, just as fun.
Here's how the chapter begins. Again, Kevin Rudd is the Prime Minister. What could go wrong? Australia's going to have a great time.
He's our great hope.
He's a normal man, and he's progressive.
He's really normal and nice. Really
he's a little
calm
Lego
man.
fella.
He does that little giggle tea.
Fair shake of the sauce bottle. Kevin Rudd won a standing ovation at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Bali in December 2007 when he signed Australia up to the Kyoto Protocol, ending years of recalcitrance under John Howard and increasing the pressure on the United States, which was still holding out under George W. Bush. There was an ominous sign for the Greens at the Australian reception straight afterwards when Rudd pointedly snubbed Christine Milne. The meanness of spirit of Labor was out for all to see, she says. And still bitter about this years later. Milne was a veteran of the UN talks. She'd spoken at the Montreal Conference in 2005, which formally ratified the Kyoto Protocol. For Milne, who had grown up in rural Tasmania, this was one of the proudest moments in her career. More than anyone in the federal parliament, she had made climate action her focus. Ahead of the 2007 election, she'd released a landmark Greens policy, re-energising Australia, which included an emissions trading scheme for power stations and heavy industry, a carbon tax for transport, and a 25% renewable energy target, and called for emission cuts of 30% by 2020 and 80% by 2050. In short, Milne had a profile on climate, nationally and internationally, and was one of only a few Australian MPs in the audience at Bali. Peter Garrett and Penny Wong were others, as Rudd thanked everyone for coming. So Rudd gets up, she recalls, and he chooses not to acknowledge me. And I just thought, well, here we go.
Here we go, what? Well, here we go. That would be annoying. It would be annoying.
A little bit mean to me. We're not best friends. According to Milne, Rudd remained hostile to the Greens. He never had a meeting with Bob in the last year of his prime ministership. Don't you find that extraordinary? He's the prime minister, they need the Greens, and yet Rudd would not meet with us, and Penny never met me either. Now, I just had to sort of double check that, because I guess she means in the last year of Rudd's prime ministership. I don't know if she means in 2013 when he came back or whatever, because there were definitely meetings between the Greens and Penny Wong and Christine Milne.
Yeah.
So that's slightly
that's a odd thing to say, but yeah, does she mean post Gillard?
Probably post CPRS, I guess. Maybe he just said "fuck yous all." Yeah. Labor was riding high and didn't believe it needed the Greens at all. The end of the Howard era was a huge relief for progressive voters, and it seemed Rudd's honeymoon with the electorate would never end, with the polls heading into uncharted territory. I really like this line. The fiscally conservative Rudd government hit the ground reviewing, however, and consulting, as with the elitist 2020 summit, to which no Greens were invited. Now, I did not know this at all.
No Greens.
A micromanaging prime minister got bogged down rather than embarking on a big picture Whitlamite wave of reform. Did you know there were no Greens at the 2020 summit?
What's the 2020 summit?
You don't know the 2020 summit?
Nah.
Oh, mate, this is huge news. This is held in 2008.
Kevin Rudd's one of his first order of businesses, big summit, Imagining Australia in 2020. And it was, of course, derided as a talk fest by his political opponents in the News Corp media. And you had everyone from Kate Blanchett to the Tim Flannery guy to come together and just talk about big ideas for Australia's future. Now,
how nice.
You don't remember this at all?
I was not really paying much. I don't know how the things that reached me. Like, I know I liked Rudd, but I don't really know why. He just wasn't John Howard. And I knew about the apology to Stolen Generations.
Right. Okay.
That's all I knew at this point.
This is after this, I think. Indigenous Australia was one of the 10 critical policy areas they were looking at this thing. The summit was criticised by Australia's Jewish community for being scheduled over the first 2 nights of Passover, which prevented many Jews from applying or attending. Oh, gosh.
Controversial.
But yes, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people credit the 2020 summit for sort of popularising the idea of the NDIS. That's sort of a big thing that sort of came out of it. Has its origins in
So it wasn't just a talk fest. Okay, there you go.
Well, it was a talk fest, I suppose, that had some polls. Like, it was always designed to be a talk fest because it was people coming together talking about what they wanted the future of the country to look like.
I mean, I was probably like 12, to be fair.
You were? Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably fair. You're protesting against the war. You'd be across this incredible moment.
Yeah, sorry.
Wayne Swan managed to get a review of the taxation system. I think that led to the Ken Henry review eventually. So it's sort of like the starting of a few things. Lots of ideas about for a referendum, like, a constitutional Bill of Rights were debated, all that kind of stuff. So
I like it. Anyway. It's nice.
Well, I hate it because there were no Greens there.
Oh, sorry. I hate it actually as well. What do the Greens know about 2020?
Rudd's first decision as Prime Minister, appointments to his cabinet, stripped his Environment Minister, Peter Garrett, of the climate portfolio, which was handed to Penny Wong from the left subfaction led by Martin Ferguson, the new Resources Minister. Rudd did not want an environmental activist like Garrett in the sensitive climate portfolio, as Labor moved to introduce an emissions trading scheme. Yeah, why would you want that? Why would you want someone passionate about the environment and the climate?
In the environment portfolio. Sure, yeah. Or climate, sorry.
A Queenslander, Rudd signalled early on that he would resist the Greens' calls to, as he put it, shut down the coal industry overnight. All Labor's efforts over the next 2 years would go into designing an ETS that would gain coalition support. The Greens were sidelined, leaving Milne as the party's climate spokesperson, arguing strenuously for higher emissions reduction targets and fewer free permits for heavy polluters and a faster transition away from fossil fuels. So that's weird. So the Greens were kind of putting out, quite up front and sort of saying, it's important to have reduction targets that would actually make a significant difference. They sort of did that ahead of time before the bill was introduced to the Parliament.
Yeah.
But I guess
did they stick to that though? I don't know,
Who knows? The Labor-Green relationship steadily deteriorated as the government balked at the 2020 targets recommended by Ross Garnaut, their own appointed fucking expert, in his interim climate change review, along with a deeper 90% cut by 2050. You got Brendan Nelson still leading the coalition. He's sort of like against an ETS. He then gets rolled by Malcolm Turnbull. Malcolm Turnbull takes over, and of course he's all Mr. Climate. But already at this point, early on in the Rudd ministry, there are doubts within the coalition about how bipartisan they should be when it comes to an ETS. Maybe John Howard, in his desperation to try and win the 2007 election, was talking bullshit. Also, this is interesting on industrial relations. Labor's Employment and Workplace Relations Minister, Julia Gillard, started on the rollback of the hated work choices regime. Thumbs up. The Greens' Rachel Stewart complained that the rollback did not go far enough. It's a misnomer to say that work choices is dead. This is dismantling the worst bits of work choices, but it's not taking us back to pre-work choices. In a prescient speech, Stewart noted that while the profit share of national income was at record highs, the wages share was at the lowest levels since the 1960s and heading downwards. By limiting the powers of Fair Work Australia to resolve disputes, that is, by restricting arbitration, Labor had turned its back on the fair go. Stewart reiterated the Greens' support for the right to strike, yes please, and the Greens were able to make some minor amendments on flexible work for parents and union rights of entry.
So is it mainly those, like the remit of Fair Work Australia, that she's talking about in terms of not dismantling all of work choices, or is it about the right to strike?
I think so.
the right to strike, yes, isn't legislated and is so incredibly restricted under the Fair Work regime. The Fair Work Australia lays out all the conditions in which you need to meet in order to go on a strike. Effectively those conditions, I think you would argue, fundamentally undermine the right to strike. And so we're told we
and
have the right to
depressed
strike in
wages.
Australia, but you have to do it
But
with
that's
notice and post and all that kind of thing.
But that's a pre-work choices thing as well. That's the accord, isn't it?
I think under the accord, the limitations on the right to strike wouldn't be as intense as they were under work choices. That's
Right,
sure.
yeah.
But I think, yes, certainly the union movement and the Greens would say, okay, work choices sucked, right? Absolutely junk it and throw it out there, but don't maintain this architecture, which still limits people's ability to withdraw their labour to get a better deal, for fuck's sake. What with you being the Labour Party?
Well, without a U. So,
Yeah,
they can't be held to that.
True. We got to get Rachel on the show, I think. I've talked to her once on my other podcast. She's fantastic, and I wonder what she's up to these days. But I don't know. Every time I read about her, just like constantly on the right side of every issue, fighting the good fight. 2008, we have the global financial crisis, the notion of a Green New Deal. This is when it starts bubbling up. Christine Milne's quite passionate about this. It's sort of brought up in response to the way to respond to the global financial crisis. Like, okay, capitalism's shat itself. The planet's on fire. Let's try and address those two issues in one. Rudd writes his big essay for the Monthly. Did you ever? I guess you wouldn't have read this either because you were 12. Have you ever read this big one?
I wasn't reading the Monthly at the time.
It got published in the Monthly, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, our prime minister is writing this long essay about the machinations of the global financial crisis and how they responded and what it all means." And he's basically saying neoliberalism's over and stuff, man.
Do you think he actually wrote it?
Oh, that's an interesting. That's an interesting conspiracy theory.
Surely not.
Well, I think he wrote it over the summer.
It's not a conspiracy.
No.
I mean, most op-eds and anything like that by an MP, they're not actually written by the MP. They'll have input. But
yeah. Well, the thing that I would say, yes, is that Kevin Rudd is a fucking control freak.
That's true.
This was entirely within his wheelhouse, and he would want all the credit because to him, writing a big essay in the Monthly would be a very, very big deal, even when he's prime minister of the country.
Great use of his time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. I buy that.
It's pretty wild if people get a chance to read it. It's a classic third way thing where he's just like, even in the wake of the global financial crisis, as the global economy is just like melting around him and the clear, legacy of deregulation is responsible for that. He still is like, well, we can't be socialist. Of course, we need to reject the left, the far left and the far right. And there needs to be a third way.
Absolutely. You just have to go with what's correct.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
I mean, he is credited with, everyone believed that he did a great job though, right? Because things were kind of relatively fine in Australia compared to the US.
Certainly. Yes. Which is, to his credit. I mean, but again, that's the state coming in to rescue capitalism from itself, and then after that, in the wake of that, it's not a reassessment of the capitalist system.
That's
it's
true.
Sort of saying, no, we just need the
as you were, Banks. Yeah.
Carry on. The Rudd government's response to the GFC is well known, with two massive fiscal stimulus packages worth $53 billion in total, based on the famous advice of then Treasury Secretary Ken Henry, go early, go hard, go households. Less well understood is the role the Greens played in passing the two packages. And of course, neither Rudd nor the Treasurer Wayne Swan credited the minor party in their memoirs.
As Christine Milne would say, here we go.
Here we fucking go. So salty. For Bob Brown, it was a defining moment in the history of the Greens, however, which demonstrated their responsible economic credentials and showed they could be trusted to act sensibly at a time of crisis. As he told the Senate, the tense negotiation with the government during the global meltdown was not an easy process for the Greens, but we came into this constructively minded. We wanted to improve this package. We've improved this package. We now support this package.
I like that quote. Sorry. I don't know. There's got to be some joke there about it. We wanted to improve this package. We've improved this package. We now support this package.
I'm gay.
I'm gay. Oh, yeah, Bob. He's gay.
That guy's gay.
We're a podcast.
That guy's a gay tree. I remember now.
Yep. Go on.
In return for supporting the stimulus package, the Greens negotiated relief for pensioners, which was incorporated, and sought $5 million salary caps for banks that were deemed too big to fail. The Greens will be looking at this legislation.
$5 million? Well, they're
Yeah, a
robbing
bit
them
low.
blind. How are those CEOs
The Greens will be looking at this
supposed
legislation
Sorry.
to see if we can't sensibly clip the wings of some of these fly-out-the-door payments to the CEOs of these banks, which are now being guaranteed by the Australian taxpayer, Brown told the ABC. The salary caps were voted down in the Senate.
Cool.
Still, Rudd commended the Greens and crossbenchers Nick Xenophon and Steve Fielding for acting responsibly. Fucking hell. Even then, as the economy is shitting its pants and everybody hates the banks and stuff, we still can't cap bankers' salaries at $5 million.
And to be clear, we're not even just talking about capping bankers' salaries, which we probably should do to start with, but we're talking about not capping them in circumstances where we are giving them billions in taxpayer dollars. We're like, make that public handout conditional on them not literally just stealing a bunch of it for them fucking selves.
For what? For getting bonuses as they go out the door as the institution they were looking after is
also,
fucking melting.
Yeah, are you really eligible for a bonus? It sounds like you kind of fucked up. Sounds like you kind of didn't do a very good job. I don't know what I don't know what the GFC, where that sat in your KPIs, but I feel like that would not be an A for performance for the banking CEOs during the fucking GFC.
0 stars. I was reading this thinking, do you think that like some of the leftist, popular sentiment, the, Occupy Wall Street that we saw roll out in the UK and the US particularly, that kind of sentiment, do you think some of that was somewhat muted, or it just simply isn't as strong in Australia because we did get through the global financial crisis in far better shape than lots of other economies, thanks to, yes, the intervention by the government and also our commodity prices remaining still pretty strong? I'm not saying that GFC was a fucking picnic for a whole bunch of people. People lost their super, softened their super, fucked over young people and employment prospects. It was a global economic downturn, but it certainly wasn't the kind of disaster that it was in those other countries. Do you think that's sort of manifested in our politics? I don't know.
Yeah, shortly. Like it didn't meet as much of a point of crisis and anger. I mean, it's interesting as well reading, I'm not sure where that was just this week, but there was some reporting about the political sentiment of Australians being less polarised and less, I guess, in a way, kind of angry than in the US. And perhaps there is something about Australians. I mean, I think it also is, like it's deference to authority and just this muted response. It does feel a little bit Australian, doesn't it? Yeah, we're not as ready to, get out and ride in the streets, even though we like to think of ourselves as troublemakers. And yes, there is a strong history of, of activism still in Australia. But like it's not, I'm not all that surprised that we were just like, oh, well, we dealt with it and it's okay. So, let's all just, come on, let's get on with it. Calm down.
Calm down, everyone. What do you think of this? After the first stimulus package, with his ear for a slogan, Brown said, greed got the world into this crisis. Green will get it out of this crisis.
Bob, you are an incredible person. If you're listening, we appreciate you. I think sometimes it doesn't hit. I don't know about it here for slogans.
They can't all be bangers, can they? Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I can't think of any of these other bangers, but
Well, I feel like we've heard some others before that didn't quite work either.
Yeah. Like green, not greed is a bit tricky because, of course, green is also the color of envy, so that gets a little.
Oh, but envy isn't greed necessarily. Yeah, I guess it kind of is, isn't it? It's also the color of money.
Great point, well made. All right, I'm going to skip over this Green New Deal stuff. I mean, basically the Greens were disappointed at the Labor's stimulus packages weren't green enough and sort of involved, the reconstruction sort of involved more fossil fuel infrastructure, which is
blah, 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 Greens being green.
Yeah. But I want to get to the juicy shit.
Okay.
Next part of this chapter is about these sort of Greens drama that play out in various branches across the country. And we start with Andrew Wilkie getting the hell out. An early setback came in mid-2008 when Andrew Wilkie quit the party, which made the front page of the Hobart Mercury. Now, we talked about him last chapter. He ran against John Howard in the seat of Bennelong, so he joined the party, and it was a Greens candidate in New South Wales. He then moved to Tassie.
Blaming the baggage, strictures, and difficulties of party politics, Wilkie left the door open to run as an independent in state and federal elections. A prominent Green told the newspaper off the record that Wilkie was never a tree hugger. Looking back, Wilkie agrees that this perception of him did not help. The Tassie Greens are first and foremost an environment party, whereas first and foremost the New South Wales Greens are a social justice party. Here I was, a high-profile person, no environmental activism history, in fact a security services history, which straight away made some people suspicious of me because there's no shortage of conspiracy theorists in the Greens. Yeah, we thought you were a CIA spy, Trader. Infiltrator, Andrew, come on.
There probably were people who thought that, to be honest.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no worries. Wilkie's resignation had actually, which, is ironic because Wilkie went on to be an incredibly strong supporter of, say, Julian Assange, for example, and has been a pretty harsh critic of the security state. But then I guess, you wouldn't put it past security agencies and intelligence agencies.
Oh my God, it's all a double blind
false flag.
trick.
Andrew Wilkie is a false flag. Wilkie's resignation had actually been a while coming. He felt stranded without support from the party during the 2007 campaign, having to fund everything himself, and believes in hindsight that his high profile made him a threat to Christine Milne, who hoped to succeed Brown one day. Christine clearly saw me as a threat to her taking over the Greens, he says, because I was close to Bob Brown, he was a friend, and some in the party saw me as a future star. With Milne supporters offside, Wilkie realised he was going nowhere inside the party. I didn't fall out with the membership, Wilkie says. I fell out with the leadership. And even then, it was half-half. Wow. This cat has claws. Both Brown and Milne reject this, saying that Wilkie had been told in advance that the party's resources in Tasmania would be thrown behind Bob's campaign and his demands were unreasonable. Andrew was quite wrong about Christine, says Brown. He was second on my Green Senate ticket and arrived at home one morning close to the election to say if he didn't get a big slice of our campaign funds, he would resign from the ticket. I complied, but campaign organisers, knowing that only one Green could be elected, were horrified. His stranding was of his own making. Brown does suggest Wilkie was not a good fit for the party, pointing to an interview Wilkie later gave to the Mercury, in which he said, "The Greens are dominated by people who will always oppose any dam or any pulp mill, no matter where it is. That is not my position. I am not anti-development. For me, the pulp mill's on the table, and so too are dams and even canal estates like Ralph's Bay."
Okay. I do want to say quickly, just putting that aside for a second.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a fucking resourcing question. I think you would be surprised if you dig below the surface of so many falling outs, party falling outs, probably from all parties, but from my experience in the Greens, when someone suddenly has, it's ideological differences, or they felt constrained by the baggage and strictures of party politics. Somewhere there is a request for additional resourcing that was not met. And they wanted more money put on their campaign because they thought they were the most winnable and the best and the most important, and it wasn't fair that the party wasn't pouring everything into them. It's such a common story.
Yeah, and it's sort of a weird pivot to be like, give me more resources so I can get elected and be a representative of this party. And then it's a switch to, this party doesn't know what they're talking about.
That I think is stupid
as bad. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Right. You're running in the Tasmanian Greens and you're shitting on like opposing dams and pulp mills. It's like, you've got to know the history of this party and this party wouldn't fucking exist without people-powered campaigns against environmentally destructive and shitty and terrible projects that would like the dams and these pulp mill campaigns. Like, little bit
that's right.
deaf to me.
And so that tracks, right? Because he obviously thought, he wanted it to be about like him and his campaign. He thought that the Greens should come in behind him rather than him being a vehicle for the Greens. And that, I think, is the mistake that sometimes people make, not realizing that the idea of the Greens is that it's meant to be a movement of people, and then candidates are just to be the voice of those people in the parliament. And so again, even when I hear about the quote baggage, strictures and difficulties of party politics in the Greens, what are you talking about? Internal democracy? That's usually what it means, is that you didn't want to have to deal with all the people who made it possible for you to get elected. You just wanted the party to fund your campaign.
even when, I mean, it sounds like Bob Brown sort of skips over a few of those internal democratic processes to help you out.
I mean,
And it's
yes.
still not good enough for you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, all this is the caveat. I've got a lot of respect for Andrew Wilkie for lots of different things. I do think he's been a pretty fierce independent member and, been amazing, particularly, fighting against the bullshit of the security state and a fierce defender of Julian Assange. But yeah, come back to the Greens, maybe, Andrew, if you want. But have the correct position.
Yeah, do you still want more dams and pulp mills? It's kind of cringe.
That also wouldn't be popular with the people of what is now Clark, what used to be Denison either. But anyway. So, bit of spiciness there. In the ACT in 2008, you've got a territory election as well. Now, in the parliament is a woman by the name of Deb Foskey. She'd replaced Kerry Tucker, who was very popular. I think was the first Green to be elected in the ACT, I believe. And this happened. As an MLA, Deb Foskey successfully badgered John Stanhope's majority Labor government into adopting a number of progressive policies. Early in her term, however, she was criticised for failing to move out of public housing, even though she was on an MLA salary of $100,000 a year. Eventually, Foskey capitulated, but the scandal hardly endeared her to the electorate, with the Canberra Times editorialising against her and a public perception forming, fairly or unfairly, that she was not the representative Kerry Tucker had been. What do we think about this? You're at 100K? Doesn't everyone have the right to public housing?
Yeah, everyone does. But that's not the way public housing works right now. No. There's not enough public housing. Not enough public housing to meet the needs of the, very... And I assume that was still the case then, yes. Like, those with the highest needs can't get it. If you're getting $100,000 a year in 2007 or 8 or whatever, I mean,
representatives...
Moving sucks. We all know moving sucks. I get it. Look, just hire a truck. You won't regret it,
Presumably she's just on a bike if she's a Greens MLA, so she doesn't have, she can't access.
It makes it difficult to move.
There were no
That's
electric
true.
cars kicking around in 2007, that stuff.
Yeah, you have to put all your stuff in a large rag, tie it to a stick, haul it over your shoulder. We hate doing that, don't we?
Just set up a hammock or whatever the fuck Greens MPs do.
Yeah, you have to get all your sage to cleanse the new place. It's a whole fucking thing.
Okay, so not ideal there. But then, listen to this. The Greens acted quite clinically to unseat her. Shane Rattenbury, a Greenpeace activist, then working on climate change in Europe, got a call out of the blue from Bob Brown's Chief of Staff, Ben Oquist, asking whether he would be interested in pre-selection for Foskey's seat of Molonglo. Molonglo? Apologies if I'm butchering that. One of the safest Green seats in the country. Rattenbury was interested and agreed to challenge, yet feels uncomfortable about it to this day, as he knew Foskey wanted to stay on. Deb was very hurt by that, he says, and that's, politics is nasty sometimes. And for me, it certainly remains a painful point, as I always liked Deb. I thought she was a good person. I never had a bad thing to say about her. Rattenbury won after a rigorous interview process and a ballot of party members, even though he'd been out of the country for 5 years.
Wow, knifing a progressive woman in the back.
Now, the question is, could she then move back into public housing?
Did she get to stay? Yeah, that's right. Did she have to move?
Great. Now I'm homeless and unemployed. Thanks a lot, ACT Greens. Now,
maybe she just stayed. Maybe she's still there.
I certainly don't believe, I'm glad that, every time people have to run for pre-selection, I think it's a fantastic part of the Greens. No one deserves a seat. Everyone has to work for their seats every single time. But this feels like something else, right? This is a coordination from the federal body to try and intervene and replace a sitting MP in the territory level, which does seem a little bit...
Yes, they still had to convince members to vote for him.
Yes.
So if you can campaign, if you can internally organise to pre-select someone, then that's indicative of some good campaigners.
I guess so. I'd like to have Shane on the show sometime too to talk about all this and what the hell the ACT Greens are up to these days. Anyway, that was spicy. But all of it pales in comparison to the shit that went down in Western Australia. Okay?
What?
So you got that. Shane Rattenbury wins. And it's a big surprise result of the 2008 election in the ACT. Labor won 7 seats, Liberals won 6, and the Greens won 4. Okay, so we've got the balance of power, and it's genuinely a toss-up, apparently, as to which side they're going to side with.
Contro.
The 4 MPs had meetings with both sides and talks dragged out as the party deliberated. Being Canberra, it was possible to bring almost the whole Greens membership together, and some
Amazing.
400-odd members were invited to decide which issues should be prioritised and which side to back. It was an animated discussion. People were excited by the enormous opportunity we've never had before, says Rattenbury, and he adds that there were no leaks even as the talks dragged on. It was very disciplined because I think the members knew they were being respected. It took weeks for the Greens to make their decision, taking advice from Brown and Milne. Rattenbury and the Greens negotiated a written agreement with the Stanhope Labor government, and Rattenbury became the first Green Speaker of any parliament in the world.
Oh, wow.
It was the beginning of a decade of the balance of power for the Greens, which would bear fruit as the ACT became the nation's climate leader, setting a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2020.
Pretty cool stuff.
Pretty cool stuff. There you go. Just get the entire, almost every member in the whole territory together to deliberate on who to support. Pretty cool. All right, but all that spiciness pales in comparison to Western Australia. In September 2008, you've got a state election and the Barnett Liberal government is elected. Okay, Greens get 12% statewide in the lower house, 11% in the upper state. We get 5 members and we get parliamentary party status in the WA Parliament. Factoring all that and, you know, Rachel Stewart and Scott Ludlam at the federal level, WA has more Green MPs than any other state in the country. So pretty cool.
Staying strong.
There's no official leader of the party. The branch doesn't like having official leaders of the party in the state, but Giz Watson becomes the unofficial leader of the party in the state.
What's the point of not having leaders if you've got an unofficial leader? That's worse.
I guess for parliamentary stuff, I guess, I don't know.
Right.
And she is, I believe, the first openly identifying a lesbian woman to be elected to any parliament in Australia, in Australian history, I believe. You check me on that. Although obviously Penny Wong is elected by this point.
Yeah, hang on.
But I don't think
she open?
But I don't think maybe Giz was elected in this particular election. She might have been there even earlier. She was elected to the Legislative Council in 1996. So then the outgoing Attorney General in Fremantle, the Labor guy, he retires. There's a by-election in his seat in Fremantle, which is a great area for the Greens. Greens candidate Adele Carles wins. She's the first Green at the state or federal level to outpoll other parties on primary vote. She got 44% to Labor's 39%. There was no Liberal candidate that ran in this particular by-election. So she gets elected, you know, pretty big deal for the party. Thumbs up.
Yes, I read about this when we were doing our WA special episode.
Okay, great.
Go on.
The Greens' triumph in Fremantle did not last a year. In April 2010, reports surfaced online that Carles and Treasurer Buswell, both married, had been having an affair for months.
Wait, so Treasurer Buswell is a Labor?
Nope.
Member?
He is a member of the Liberal fucking party, right? So yes, Colin Barnett's just been elected, and Troy Buswell, she's full, and he's a hot piece of man meat, I gotta say.
Is he?
Nope.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna Google.
Look up. Yeah.
Oh, he's not.
And listeners at home, treat yourself to a photo of Troy Buswell. Not my type, I guess I'd say.
No, oh yeah, I don't see it.
How would you describe him? Yeah, okay.
I don't know how to describe this man. Very rectangular face. Looks like a politician.
Sharp quarters, this guy. Carles initially responded it was a scurrilous rumour mongering by Labor, and Buswell would not comment. But behind the scenes, her colleagues had known about it since February. A week later, Carles gave an interview to Perth Sunday Times confirming the stupid affair. She said it was over, apologised to Buswell's family and to her fellow Greens, and insisted she had never sought nor obtained any political favours from the Treasurer. It was just about the fucking.
Oh.
Buswell's career unravelled, and he went to the backbench, I should say. Now, she says it was over, but they did eventually get together. They left their respective partners to then be together for the remainder of her time in Parliament.
I just don't get right. Okay, because I was going to say, was it all about the forbidden nature of it and blah-de-blah?
That's what makes it so hard. You're a
I
Liberal.
still don't.
I'm agreed.
So yeah. But then they get together. I know we've had this conversation before, but I just do not understand how you can be with someone that has theoretically diametrically opposed values to you.
Yes.
Like, the fuck is wrong with you? What are you talking about?
Greens upper house member Robin Chappell said the affair had nothing to do with politics. Look at the way Adele has voted on almost every issue. It has been with Labor. It's been a relationship issue and needs to be kept as that. A relationship issue? But the loyalty was too much for many Greens members who pushed to expel her, although the party stopped short of demanding her resignation. Carles quit the party within weeks of confirming the affair, claiming that she'd been bullied into going public, particularly by Watson. I could see no other way forward given my breakdown in relationship with Giz, Carl said. She sat as an independent and retired from politics at the next election. Now, some subsequent research found out that she wanted to run again. She approached the Liberal Party, but she knew she couldn't win if the Liberals ran a candidate. So she approached had meetings with the Premier and high-ranking Liberals who loved the fact that she'd won this seat off Labor, by the way, and she was obviously quite close to the Liberal Party, to put it mildly. And she went to them and said, "Can you not run a candidate? Because the only way I can win in the seat is if there's no Liberal." So,
do we have any more information about this woman's politics? Why was she in the Greens?
Well, she had been involved in a local environmental campaign in Fremantle and got a bit of respect and cred for that, I think.
Tree Tory.
Potentially. She made well.
Allegedly.
Tree Tory who fucks. Who fucks rectangles. No. She, retired at the next election because she couldn't win. Again, I just judge you on the idea of that, I'm in the Greens and I'm not going to run if, or I was in the Greens, I'm not going to run if I can't win. It's ridiculous. I'm like, well, okay. Commitment to principles there.
Grow up. Yeah.
The scandal on such fertile electoral grounds for the Greens was a massive own goal, and a decade later the party's primary vote had still not recovered in Fremantle. Watson, looking back, is not sure how the party could have handled things differently. Carles was a popular, long-standing local Green, and no vetting process would have picked up such an improbable affair.
Yeah. I mean, what question do you put in the candidate interview to pick that up?
Just include some photos of Troy Buswell and be like, what do you think of this? Do you find this
man attractive? Very good, thank you. Do you find this man attractive? Thank you.
Next. Do you think it would have been different if it was a Labor MP? Would it have mattered?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Probably. I guess it probably would have mattered politically at the time, but I think it's just as disgusting. For the record.
I think it's a pretty weak defense to be like, look, she never voted with this guy that she was fucking. I'm be like, I don't know. You never know what's going to happen. And it's not ideal, guys. Not ideal. Finally, this last bit before we wrap up this particular episode, and we'll carry on with the chapter next time. In Queensland, the Queensland Greens got a shot in the arm in October 2008 when the Labor member for the inner Brisbane lower house seat of Indooroopilly, that's how you say it?
Yes.
Indooroopilly. Ronan Lee,
Correct.
a committed environmentalist, defected over the Bligh government's inaction on climate change and failure to protect the state's wild rivers. As with Chris Hanna in South Australia, however, the Greens' win was relatively short-lived. Lee was voted out in a general election 6 months later. Have we talked about this guy before?
I don't know. I think of him as stolen valor guy because he's the one that you have to kind of Michael Berkman when he won Maiwar was the first Queensland Greens MP elected to the Queensland Parliament. He wasn't the first Queensland Greens MP ever.
Right.
But yeah, that's where. So Indooroopilly is now Maiwar, FYI. That's where I live. It was sort of, it was Indooroopilly and Mount Cootha, and then a redistribution took parts of those, most of Indooroopilly and a little bit of Mount Cootha, made it Maiwar. Indooroopilly no longer exists.
Gotcha.
Mount Cootha no longer exists, yeah.
I looked up Ronan Lee's Wikipedia, and I have no evidence for this, but I just think that maybe Ronan Lee edits Ronan Lee's Wikipedia page.
Okay, go on.
In 2008, Lee announced that he'd resigned from the LP and defected to the Greens, becoming their first Queensland MP. Lee subsequently became one of the first MPs in Queensland to publicly support same-sex marriage. As the Greens' parliamentary leader, Lee campaigned at the election for a moratorium on shale oil mining the Great Barrier Reef, support for renewable energy, the construction of light rail in Brisbane instead of new road construction, and free public transport for young people and pensioners. There's a few other bits in the entry that just give him a good gloss. But yeah, just the Greens parliamentary leader for yourself.
I don't think that. I mean, they wouldn't have had party status in Parliament if they only had one MP. They wouldn't have had a parliamentary leader, and they certainly didn't have a leader of the party in terms of he wasn't. Yeah, that's I guess he's just decided that's who he is.
In a press,
whoever who edited the Wikipedia has decided.
Yeah,
in a press conference talking about it, he said, "I think that my future as someone who wants to make positive change for my community and on the environment is with a wonderful party like the Queensland Greens." Now, that's all well and good, but like he loses his seats to Libs and then disappears? Does he stick around? Is he still part of the movement? Or where is Ronan Lee?
Yeah, where is he? That's a good question. I always got the impression that he wasn't really not a cherished chapter of the Queensland Greens. So I don't know where he ended up now. But
hey, that's a former leader you're talking about, man. Have some goddamn respect.
I'm sorry. Former leader, that's right. Oh, RonanLee.com.
My new homepage. Anyway, there you go. That's the end of part 1 of chapter 9. Into power, of course. We do need to enter into power very shortly. We've got the CPRS on the way and the minority government under Julia Gillard when the Greens start doing some cool shit. That's next time.
Hell yeah. Next time on Inside the Greens. Just for the record, Ronan Lee seems to be like an international human rights guy now, and he researches human rights violations in Myanmar.
He's an expert on that.
So yes. I guess
that's something.
Yep, that's his thing.
I haven't done that. Who the fuck am I? You know?
I haven't done that either. That's right.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for supporting the show. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.
Serious danger to Australia.